Welcome to this last episode of Season 2 of the Blue Dragon podcast. And today we have Jason Brown as the guest. And Jason Brown wrote a great book on NIST CSF, the Cybersecurity Framework. And as you listen to this episode, I particularly liked his insights on the three-layered approach of cybersecurity governance: the policies, the standards, and the procedures. I wish you a wonderful time listening to this episode and enjoy. So welcome everybody to this last episode of the Blue Dragon podcast season 2, and today we have as a guest Jason Brown. And Jason Brown is a seasoned cybersecurity leader with nearly 20 years of experience across both the public, private sectors and also independent consulting. He is currently an information technology security manager at The Shift Group, a specialty vehicle manufacturer, where he oversees the security of IT systems, software development, and product lines. And Jason holds top industry certifications, including the CISSP, and he has a master's degree in information systems management. And on top of that, he is a former CISO and V-CISO, and he is the author of this great book, Unveiling NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 by PACT. Jason, welcome to the episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. And also forgot to mention, you are located in Michigan in the United States, so it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
For the audience who may not know you yet, can you describe your background and how you ended up writing this great book on NIST CSF 2.0?
Yeah, so I started off in cybersecurity, like you said, about 20 years ago, where I initially started off as a network engineer working with firewalls and load balancers and stuff like that, and then slowly progressed into the cyber field. Worked at the state of Michigan government for about 5-6 years, and was a CISO for an internet service provider here in the state of Michigan as well. So, yeah. Great.
And how did you end up in writing a book for PACT?
Actually, this is my second book. So my first book, I reached out to PACT and requested that I write a book. And they were more than willing to let me spew a bunch of words out on a piece of paper. And then they reached out and was like, "Hey, you did such a great job on the first one. Do you mind writing a second one?" And that's how it came about.
Nice. Yeah, indeed. There is indeed a mention of an earlier book. What's the title of that first book?
The Executive Cybersecurity Program Handbook.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but that's also on the to-do list then. For the audience, I read your book, Unveiling the NIST CSF 2.0 in July of this year, and I was really amazed at the way you explain NIST CSF. So for the audience who may have heard the term and the framework, can you share what is the NIST CSF and why is it important for IT and business leaders?
Yeah, definitely. So the NIST CSF was originally drafted in 2014. And then 4 years later, version 1.1 came out, and it's solidified on 5 core functions of the cybersecurity framework. Then when the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 came out, they introduced governance into the core. So not only from identity, protection, response, and recover, but it allowed the governance piece to fit in the middle with all of the other functions kind of wrapping around it. And the governance part of it really became the core of the book itself. So
exactly. Now, NIST CSF came out, I think, indeed last year, February, I believe, and then your book came out in December. So you're really on top of your game and following the trends. What was the biggest, if you would say, the biggest trigger for NIST to do a new version?
I think it really comes down to supply chain and supply chain governance. They had supply chain in the identify core function for a number of years. And then when 2.0 came out, they broke that out into governance as well. So I'm sure that you're aware in the European sector where you've got DORA now and you've got some of the other ones. I really think the supply chain is really going to be fundamental for years to come.
That's a great point. And I can add to that. Indeed, in Europe, we have NIS or NIS 2. We have DORA for the financial sectors, and indeed both of them heavily focus on supply chain security, indeed. And actually, as we're Belgium-based here, and last weekend, the Brussels airport was again hit by a cyber incident because one of the suppliers had a cyber incident which took the airport down. So indeed, supply chain security, very important. Now, from your perspective, the NIST CSF, would you say it's like the golden standard for frameworks, or how do you see this?
I see it as an introduction to frameworks. You've got ISO, you've got several other NIST special publications and things like that. I've worked at least for the last 10 years developing cyber programs for organizations. And I will typically use the CSF as the initial framework to bring into an organization.
It's a great entry point to get a...
It is, yeah. And, to be honest, I typically will use two different ones. One of them being the CSF, because it's great for the administrative controls. But I will also use the Center for Internet Security controls as well, which is great for technical controls. So I'll usually marry those two up together.
Nice. Very nice. Yes, you mentioned in your book as well. Great, love it. Now, from my perspective, being a CISO myself and actually having multiple customers at the same time, like a fractional CISO or a V-CISO, sometimes you meet clients that see cybersecurity compliance as checkbox exercises, right? Mm-hmm. And some boards as well, actually, like, okay, let's check off the boxes. How can leaders use the NIST CSF to use it like a value driver rather than just a compliance checklist?
I mean, I've talked to a number of executive leadership and I've talked to them about not only adopting a framework, but how do you commercialize the framework as well, right? I mean, a lot of organizations have an issue or a problem where they may not be certified for a SOC 2 or an ISO or something along those lines, where if you get the certification or if you do the alignment to the CSF and you can have that backing, you can promote the fact that you're not only taking the confidentiality of the data, but you're also taking the availability and the integrity of the data as well. And you are, like I said, commercializing it so you can generate revenue on the security of your program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And basically what we're seeing here in Europe is this Europe's regulation, which basically says that if you comply, and everybody needs to comply in the end, but if you comply, it's also showing that as a business leader, you take care, you have due diligence of your cyber information, which helps build trust and thus unlocks new customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the flip side of that, just because you adopted a framework doesn't mean you're secure either. So there are two sides of it. I mean, if you've been in the cybersecurity realm for, as long as you and I have, I'm sure you've heard of PCI DSS and the bad press that companies got 10, 15 years ago because you were saying, well, they were PCI compliant, but they got popped. But they were compliant, but they got popped. Mm-hmm. It's the back and forth that says that, you adopt a framework, you check all the boxes, doesn't mean you're secure.
Exactly. So then I remember when I was at university, last year I finished my master's, and the professor said there was a a crazy experiment where they did an ISO 9001, which is the quality management standard, and they built a concrete life-saving vest for in the sea, but concrete, so you would drown immediately. And the product was ISO 9001 certified, right? But if you would use it, you would die, right?
Right.
So you can get certified and be compliant, and yet it kills the user or the business. So what then, in your perspective, is the role of the CISO to make sure it's not this kind of crazy just compliance thing?
Build those relationships, not only with your peers, but your subordinates and your executive leadership team. Because without the backing of the ELT and your peers, program's not going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have that support, not only from a program development, but also from a financial backing as well. Because, open source will only get you so far, right? There are other programs, other software and things like that you got to buy to help complement the security program that you have.
Nice, yeah. And also for our European audience, the NIST CSF, so the Cybersecurity Framework, is actually the basis that we're using in Belgium, called the Cyber Fundamentals Framework, which is heavily influenced by NIST CSF. It was still version 1.1. So the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, those 5 points basically help you to start with a cybersecurity program. So that's why I also recommend your book, Jason, to European fellow professionals and leaders, because you may say, yeah, but it's just American. No, we're using it as the basis for our own frameworks here in Belgium and also across Europe. So it's a highly recommended book. And from your perspective, you've been a CISO yourself and a vCISO. What is like the common mistake you see organizations make when adopting the NIST CSF?
Let me start off with a story, and then I'll kind of flip back and answer your question. So when I come into a new organization, I really like to perform an assessment on the organization itself against a framework like the CSF 2.0. That, to me, helps me identify the gaps and helps me develop that strategy moving forward to develop that cyber program. In the last couple of chapters of the book, I kind of talked to you about how to run an assessment, the different types of assessments and stuff like that. I think the CSF does a really good job on telling you how to get to a certain point, but it doesn't tell you all the bits and pieces that kind of come together. So, for instance, we talk about the supply chain, we talk about log correlation and things like that. But, a framework will tell you what to do, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. And that's why I wrote that book, to help readers find out or discover there are more things to the framework than just putting a policy together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, for the audience who may not be that familiar with the NIST CSF, the 5 or the 6 functions, can you just briefly go through them, just high level, like what's the purpose, what's the benefit of each of them, and how do they tie together?
Yeah, so the governance or the govern helps establish policy standards and procedures, helps you understand the business environment and things like that. Identify really is pinpointed to identifying the components that are in your environment, not only from software to hardware, identifying your people, making sure that identity and access management processes are put into place. The detect is one where you look at the logging and you try and correlate all of the information coming together, and how you look at the alerts and how you process those alerts. The recover and response really deal with the incident itself and how you would come back and rectify that incident. So not only do we talk about tabletop exercises, but we also talk about crisis communication and just preparing your staff to react when an incident does occur. And then lastly, protect. You're protecting your environment, you're protecting your users, you're putting defenses in place. So I didn't go in order, but at least I hit them all.
That's best indeed. Nice. Yeah, and what I really like about the improvement with 2.0 is that they took the govern as a separate function, because before it was like scattered across all the different functions. Mm-hmm. And if you had to choose and you had to start at a new company, let's say, and limited time, limited budget, very short timeline, which function would you focus on first?
I would function on the governance one first. Yeah.
Why?
Because people are the hardest thing to change. I mean, technology may be hard, but computers do what you tell them to do. People don't. So that's why I say governance is the most important piece, but it's also the hardest piece to overcome.
Yeah, I fully agree there on that point. That's why I rephrased the value proposition of my company to that many organizations, they have a fragmented cybersecurity approach. There's like some local technical hero who's trying his best, to apply some protection, but it's very fragmented. There is no coherence and no governance around it. And so my value proposition is now like helping European organizations turn their fragmented cybersecurity into well-governed cyber resilience. Mm-hmm. So to move from that fragmentation to a well-governed approach, so that action hero gets support from ELT, that there are clear policies. So I fully agree there. What do you think, in your opinion and experience, is the biggest hurdle within governance?
The people part of it again. I mean, it literally comes down to people. I've put in quite a few different governance programs, and it's hard to teach sometimes, and it's hard to change people's thoughts and minds and things like that. So I will typically do, ask me anythings or brown bag lunches or stuff like that to help overcome that barrier. But I still think that piece is something that we've got to work on.
Yeah, the people. What is your experience? Let's say an average enterprise, like mid-sized, like 250 people, let's say, and you're the V-CISO and you need to do the governance function. How do you approach and build that connection with ELT, with executive leadership teams?
So working with them, working with the board of directors, understanding the business processes and understanding what the business does, and then, continuing to have that open dialogue with them. I mean, it makes it easier if you have open dialogue with your ELT, because you can have heart-to-heart conversations with them, and there is no... They don't feel scared coming to you and asking you, or feeling dumb coming to you and asking you questions on things. That has been the biggest part of my program development, is just building those external relationships.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now in Europe, with the NIS2 or the NIS2 regulation, executives can be held personally accountable and liable for not taking care of the cybersecurity aspect of their organization. So when an attack happens and data gets breached, or it's a downtime with serious impact, they can be held personally liable with fines and even a ban on taking up that role in the future. Mm-hmm. How is that in the US? Are you seeing this awareness as well amongst cyber or leaders?
I am. But we have the same problems here too. I mean, if you look at, what was it, the Uber CISO from a number of years ago. He was indicted and fined for lying on a press release. So, with the SEC increasing their regulations and their oversight, filing an SEC, I think it's an 8K every time you have a breach. I mean, a lot of CISOs are jumping up and down for joy because of the oversight, because of everything that's going on. But, on the flip side, there's a lot of CISOs that don't want the CISO job anymore because they don't want to feel like they're going to miss out on their family by going to jail, right? So, yeah, I mean, the CISO position is always one to strive towards, but I know a lot of people that are they're shying away from it now because of that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I personally took an extra insurance because you're dealing in cybersecurity advice on the C-level, so I took an extra insurance just for that liability. But also the way I try to cover that is like you mentioned with building relationships. And for me, I want to be on the agenda of a C-level every 3 months or once a quarter. And so far it's working. Once a quarter, half an hour or an hour on the agenda, where you just share and explain what's going on in the company about cyber resilience so that they are aware. And also you have the minutes of meetings afterwards. So you know exactly who was there and what was the topic. So in case of something happens, you can trace it back like we were all aware of this, right?
Yeah.
Any other tips or practices you can share with us on this topic?
Just continue to learn. I mean, it is one of those things where, cybersecurity, you're always learning, you're always adapting. So yeah, I mean, continue to learn, read the regs, read the newsletters, read the magazines. I mean, just make sure that you're always staying up to date.
Exactly. Yeah, and what I also, coming back to your point of building a good relationship with C-level, what I also explain is that when they are investing in cybersecurity, like awareness across the organization, that knowledge is not just beneficial for the organization, but also for them in their private lives and protecting their families on the digital space. So it is one investment, but it has multiple return on investments on different fronts. And once they understand that, they actually are more involved in following the trainings and getting up to date.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, how should CISOs then best, communicate the value of this framework, the NIST CSF, for example, to these non-technical executives?
One of the things that I've done is developed an enterprise risk program, and I've gone through and identified all of our IT assets and identified all the risks that are associated with those assets, and then have that business conversation with our executive team and say, look, you've got a $250,000 server sitting over here. It hasn't been patched in 20 years. It's critical to the company. What can we do to fix this? Right? I mean, it's been a neglectorino for so long. I don't know if we can fix it. But, having those conversations and driving enterprise risk is really where you want to be. You don't want to be the person standing there with the no sign, right? That doesn't get the business anywhere. So being a business enabler, be business risk, identify everything, and have those conversations with your executive team.
Hi there, I'm Jetro Wils, your host, and I love bringing you fresh insights on cybersecurity, cloud technology, governance, and auditing. Cyber threats are evolving fast. Protecting your business, ensuring compliance and maintaining trust with your stakeholders isn't just important, it is essential. Ignoring cybersecurity, that's a risk you don't want to take. No matter your industry or company size, protecting sensitive data and ensuring operational resilience should be a priority. Regulations like NIST 2 and DORA are already shaping the way businesses handle security, making compliance non-negotiable. At SecWise, we help businesses like yours stay secure and compliant. Here's what we offer: security roadmaps, practical steps tailored to your operations, Azure, M365, or even your hybrid workplace. Compliance readiness: meet ISO 27001, NIST 2 and DORA requirements with confidence. SOC implementation, real-time threat detection and response 24/7. Cloud and AI security, advanced protection against evolving threats, and end-to-end support, from risk analysis to remediation and continuous access to our specialists. Since you're listening to the Blue Dragon podcast, as a thank you, you will get 3% off your next purchase within the SecWise portfolio, whether it's a full NIST 2 assessment or managed security services. 3% off your next purchase can save you hundreds of euros. Visit secwise.eu/Blue Dragon podcast to get started. Make cybersecurity your strength. Get started today. Visit secwise.eu/Blue Dragon podcast. Great advice. Now, one of the things that I've encountered is the old school mentality that cybersecurity and cyber resilience and extension is an IT issue. It's the IT problem, right? So why should we, as other, directors or division heads, why should we be involved in cybersecurity? What would you say to such a statement?
Yeah. I mean, I kid you not. I was onboarding probably 100 people a few months ago, and a factory line worker came up and was like, I don't need to pay attention to cybersecurity. They're never going to do anything to me. And, I've seen several attacks come in that have been pinpointed to those that say that, cyber doesn't mean anything to them. They're too low on the totem pole to be a target, right? And small to medium-sized businesses still have that same mentality. They're too small of a target to worry about cybersecurity. What was it? Jaguar a couple months ago or last month just said that they had a cyber incident and their production has been down for a couple of weeks now. There hasn't been any details on that yet, but if you look at the revenue that Jaguar is losing day in and day out, having to go back to paper and pen for selling vehicles, I mean, it's not just an IT problem, it's a business problem.
Exactly.
And go ahead.
So then the question would be, let's say you are in front of the board and some executives fully agree that, it's a top priority, but it's for IT. IT should handle it. What would you say to that argument?
Yeah, I would say, let's sit down and continue to have that conversation. You're starting to get in the right direction, but the business is more towards the left. Keep going left, right? So we've got to, in taking, why I said left is, taking that DevSecOps, shifting to the left, trying to get more towards the project initiation, trying to get more towards the executive team, and just continue to have that conversation. Tell them why it's so important. Mm-hmm. Tell them why it's a business risk and not an IT risk. Yeah. But have that CYA afterwards too.
Last week I did a workshop with a big client in the government, and it was the ID.BE, so the Identified Business Environment. Well, it's still ID, so it's still a 1.1 version, but the business environment. And I was sitting with the representatives of each of the departments. And I said, you're all here because we want to understand your business, your environment, because if we don't understand what's it all about and what is critical for you, then how can we protect the right things, right? And I also mentioned that it's not up to me as the CISO or the IT team to decide for them what's important. So I say, you're here because you have a voice, you can present your department. And by framing it like that, they were really on board and helping out, And I said, think about what if this system goes down, can you go back to a plan B? And by having those simulations or thought exercises with business people who are completely a-technical, I would say, in this matter of security, they are still involved, and you get that buy-in and building up the relationship. So yeah, I like what you're saying, and that would be my 2 cents on top of that. It's for them that we're doing this, so they need to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Because in the old days, you had IT decides everything for us. And
Right.
now we invite you to take part of the conversation. So yeah, and that's what I love about the NIST CSF. It really builds and has these anchors towards the business to include them and document what they're saying. So I love it. Now moving forward, there are still a couple of things I want to talk to you about the book. But how do you see the framework, the NIST CSF framework, evolve? Is there a 2.5 or a 3.0 coming soon? How do you see
I'm
this?
sure they're going to adopt AI. They have to. I mean, I see a lot with artificial intelligence right now, and the AI framework that NIST put out. I mean, you almost have to have a master's or a PhD to read the AI framework. I mean, it's very technical. It's very good, but it's very technical. I really think that emerging technologies needs to be not an afterthought. It needs to be upfront and talked about. So I think the 2.5 or the 3.0 is going to have some of that in there. If you would have asked me that same question 10 years ago, I would have said supply chain and cloud computing, right? I mean, it's the new tech, and it's the thing that everybody's afraid of. Yeah, I think emerging tech is definitely the next thing to tackle.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I can imagine that as well. Yeah. But then the question is, as I was reading through your book, there is a part that really struck home for me, was like really interesting and really valuable for me. It is the part where you explain the 3 layers, where you have the policy, the standard, and then the procedures. And for most of us, at least here in Europe or Belgium, we understand the policies and the procedures. That's typical ISO approach. But the standards concept is something that you introduced to me. Can you share more about those 3 layers and the importance of these standards?
Yeah, definitely. So the policy really should be written to give to a third party without an NDA. I mean, it should be the what, not the how or the why. I mean, you should really focus on, I'm going to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of my IT resources. I'm not going to tell you how I'm doing it, because that requires you to sign off on a non-disclosure agreement so you can see it. When I was working at the state, we ran into a big problem where we would throw all 3 into one document, and that document would be 30 pages long. And it got to be so cumbersome to look for our controls during an audit that we had to take a circle back and break everything up. And that's where we sat down and was like, okay, the standards, those have to get pulled out of the policy. Those are encryption. What type of encryption do you use? What version of SSH do you use? Do you it's a more low-level guideline than anything, if I could explain it in that way. But no, it's definitely a need there to document all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And you also mentioned, and just for the audience to be able to picture it in their mind if you're driving or you're just listening, the policy is the high level document that you can actually, as Jason puts in his book, you can publish it online or on your website, because it's high level intentions and commitments of the organization. But then one level below are the standards, where you basically, which is confidential, where you say which standards do we apply, which encryption level should be the minimum, etc. But then you have the procedures that will explain how do I configure that standard across, our technical ecosystem. And by having that three-layered approach, which you taught me with your book, really helped me in my daily life structuring governance in a better way. Because indeed, many organizations just put everything in one document, right? And then that goes to C-level, and C-level says, "What the heck is this? 30 pages of TLS? I don't understand anything." So, and your approach just slices it up in the right, abstraction layer for each target audience. So I love that. So, but then you also mentioned in your book the open policy framework, I believe.
Yeah.
Please share more about that.
Yeah, so that was something that I created a few years ago to help reiterate that three-pronged approach for document development and to help people understand the reasons why a policy is different than a standard and a standard is different than a procedure. So that was something that I started. And it's been a work in progress. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I went. It's a GitHub site, I believe, or repository. I went there, and you basically have the structure, and people can fork and then add their own policies. But I really like that approach because the other day somebody asked me, "Jetro, why should we use this three-layered approach?" And I said, if you don't do it, then typically what's going to happen is either you put everything in one document, which is crazy, or you're going to put the how-to configuration, like how to configure the TLS in the firewall with a standard. But if the tooling changes, there's a new firewall or a new vendor,
right,
you have to update that. So I love the three ways, the three layers. So great. But then you also explain in your book about the life cycle, the importance of the document life cycle of all of these documents. Can you share more about it? Like, what is it? How would you do it? Or why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just a review once a year of all of your policy standards and procedures. It's to make sure that the documents are a living document and they will abide by or they meet the requirements that the business puts out. So, for instance, if I go back to encryption again, I mean, MD5 and some of the other hashing algorithms are known to be breakable, and a lot of organizations used to have those as part of a standard. And if you don't go through those and update them once a year, you may be on standards that are breakable and put your company at risk. So that's why it's so important to have that life cycle to review those documents and get them approved.
Yeah, great. So for the audience who's thinking of applying for Belgium the cyber fundamentals, which is basically NIST CSF in its core, and having these three layers, it's not enough to do just that. You also need to have this follow-up of how do I deal with updates? How do I go back through the, let's say, review committee or getting an approval on the right layer, because it has to be reviewed and published. So, and in your book, you have a nice summary indeed of how to do this. So I highly recommend this. So, Jason, any other updates for your future, like a new book or what's coming?
Oh no! I've promised my wife I would take a break for a while. I've got a 7-year-old and want to spend some time with her. I mean, when you're writing, you are consumed by writing, and so nope, just vacations and spending time with the family. That's my future for right now.
That's great. Hey, one last question. You're in the automotive industry currently, if I understand correctly.
Yes. Yep.
What is going on there for cybersecurity? Because I'm hearing a lot about the OT as well. There's a new standard specifically for OT and automotives. Like, what's going on there?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Sure, no problem. But from your experience, I mean, are you seeing the car is basically a computer on wheels these days?
Oh God, yes. I mean, so yeah, for the last 5 or 6 years or so, I mean, I have been working with ADAS systems and CAN bus. So yeah, I mean, a vehicle anymore is a computer on wheels. It really is. I was talking to an architect a couple of years ago where they were talking about inter-car communication. So a Ford vehicle talking to another Ford vehicle, getting road conditions and stuff like that. And how do you protect that communication from two vehicles on the road? It's futuristic, but it is definitely cool tech. It really is something that's very cool. So yeah, it's funny. My dad just bought a new car, and he was talking about the autonomous driving features in there, and he's like, I will never trust a vehicle to drive on its own. But I'm like, yeah, but my daughter, when she turns 16, is she even going to drive a vehicle? Right? Is the vehicle going to drive it for herself? So if you ever make it out to Black Hat out in Las Vegas, Aptiv will usually bring a car out there for the conference so people can go and hack it and things like that. So it's definitely up and coming tech. It really is.
Yeah, which brings me to perhaps the last question then. As a CISO in this changing industry with automotive, how does this impact your role as a CISO?
It does and it doesn't. I mean, I still take care of the day-to-day operations and stuff like that. But with my new role, I don't play so much in product security as much as I used to. Back a few years ago, I was doing everything. It was building encryption systems to protect our vehicles and stuff like that. So, yeah, it hasn't really changed too much.
Yeah, I think that the landscape is more complex now, and the attack surface increased, but you can still use NIST CSF. The identify now covers also the vehicles, right? Because they're computer on wheels, it needs to be patched and updated and monitored and protected as well. So it basically just extends the asset inventory.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Now, if people would like to reach out to you, Jason, with questions or anything, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, shoot me an email. My email is at the end of the book, or it's jason@jasonbrown.us. I'm sure you can figure out my website from my email. I don't have much of an imagination, so that's how I came up with my my URL. So you can also find me out on LinkedIn under Jason Brown 17.
Wonderful. We'll put all the links in the show notes, also the link to your book, which I highly recommend, even if you're like non-technical, you're an IT leader, business leader, want to understand what's the cybersecurity program about. I think the book is, how many pages is it? Not even 200.
It's like
150 I see here, so give or take. It's a great read. I highly recommend it. We'll put the link in the show notes as well. Jason, thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you much. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Blue Dragon podcast with Jason and all about NIST CSF. If you've enjoyed this conversation and this episode, do give it a like and give some comment or share it. And also join the Blue Dragon podcast community by going to www.bluedragonpodcast.com, where you can subscribe for the Insiders newsletter. You get a complete episode breakdown and the key points of this episode. I wish you a wonderful day. Next time in season 3, we'll hope to continue next year, and see you then.